How's it going, everyone? This is Paul Garcia of Project Spurs with the After the Game segment of the San Antonio Spurs' preseason finale against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So on, what was this? Thursday. Yes, Thursday, the San Antonio Spurs played their final preseason game against the Thunder. They ended up losing 118-112. But again, this is preseason. Coach Pop pulls the starters toward the end of the game. And so it's understandable. They played very well in this game. The Spurs, they hung in there with OKC. So let's first begin by kind of going over the game in general. Then from there, I will go through some quotes that I took away from Coach Pop and the players post game. So let's first look at the shot location box score. So their leading scorer off the bench was Josh Primo. In just the second game of the preseason, he ends up with 23 points off the bench. He was very aggressive about coming in right away and attacking the Thunder defense. They really had a tough time containing him. Oklahoma City. Primo got into the lane multiple times, was able to finish there with 14 of his 23 points in the paint. Keldon Johnson had 19 points as the second leading scorer for the Spurs. Again, he saw what Primo was doing, attacking the Thunder defense. That paint was open for Primo, so Keldon took advantage as well and started attacking the Thunder defense as well there, where 16 of his 19 points came in the paint. Devin Vassell continues to show that three-level scoring where he scores from all different areas in the paint, in the mid-range, from three, from the free throw line. So Devin ends up with 18. Doug McDermott has a double-digit night with 11 points off the bench. Doug's continued all this preseason to be an instant spark off the bench with his aggressiveness. Tre Jones also finishes with 10 points. So those are the Spurs' five leading scorers. The big number I want to show you here is the points in the paint. The Spurs got 68 points in the paint of their 112 points. That was 61% of their percentage of points. And so as we see here, when we look at the shot breakdown for the Spurs, this is somewhere where they were very aggressive. As we can see, 64% of their shots were against that Thunder defense. Now, again, the Thunder defense is likely going to be one of the bad ones in the NBA because they're one of the teams to not win so many games, just like the Spurs. So against a team that doesn't have a good defense like the Thunder, like it showed, the Spurs really took advantage and they really attacked them nonstop. And then, both teams struggled from three. I'm not going to go too much into the numbers just because, again, it was preseason basketball. But again, the big thing here is that the Spurs saw that the paint was open and they continued to nonstop attack OKC. And you really see that with Primo and Keldon's performances. Now let's go to some players who played well overall. This is just using a model that I created called the Impacts, using all the box score stats and seeing who really stuck out. So, of course, Keldon Johnson really sticks out here. Not only was he scoring for the Spurs, he was collecting rebounds. He was creating for his teammates. He did have 4 personal fouls, but he also did some other things on defense. Tre Jones, even though points doesn't sound like a lot, but then when you see what else he did, he was active on the boards with 8 rebounds, 3 assists, getting the team where they need to go. He was the starting point guard again. Josh Primo, like I mentioned, ends up with 23 points off the bench. I mean, Primo was so efficient. He almost scored a minute, point per minute with 0.96 points per minute there. Created for his teammates with 4 assists. He'll continue to work on the fouls, 4 of them, and then turnovers 4. But again, for Primo, he kind of missed the entire preseason because he was on the injured list. So for him, 4 turnovers is understandable. It's going to happen. Jakob Poeltl, 10 rebounds in his minutes, also 5 assists. Again, he continues to be that quarterback for the team. He does a really good job with those dribble handoffs and kind of seeing when guys make those back cuts. He's developed some chemistry with his teammates. And so he's continued to get the ball moving for the team. He's like their quarterback, like I mentioned, there at like the free throw line area or up top at the key. He does have 5 turnovers. That'll be something that he needs to clean up, and he's going to work on that with his teammates as the regular season starts. Devin Vassell, just another good night here. 18 points. 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Devin mentioned after the game how defense is something that he says that he feels like his defense slipped a little bit in the preseason, or he wasn't as focused on it, but it's going to definitely be something he wants to be ready for on opening night. He's going to really bring that part of his game out. He says that he was focusing a little bit too much on the offense, but defense will definitely be something that sticks out for him. So those are some of the main players when you look at the box score stats for the players. So now I'm going to go through some just the keys that I kind of wrote down during the game. Just kind of each quarter, I'm going to go quarter by quarter. Some of the big takeaways from the team. So the first quarter was Primo. I wrote here, Primo, he had 8 points off the bench right away in the first quarter. Something also interesting in that first quarter was Romeo Langford got early minutes. So the reason why that is important is because we know that before the regular season starts for the Spurs next week on, I believe Wednesday's their first game, they are going to have to waive not only a player on a training camp deal, someone probably like Alize Johnson's probably going to get waived, but then they have a choice here where they either have to waive a player on a non-guaranteed deal like Tre Jones or Bates-Diop, who we think that they're going to both not get waived because Tre Jones is their starting point guard. We've seen all preseason. Bates-Diop has been in Pop's rotation every single game of these 5 preseason games, so I think they want to keep him for this season on their team. So then the question becomes, who on a guaranteed contract gets waived? So that those 2 players most likely are either Romeo Langford or maybe a player like Joe Wieskamp. Now, even though Wieskamp hasn't played a lot in this preseason, the Spurs just re-signed him in this offseason. So there's no reason why, based on what the front office did, why they would want to waive him. I know he didn't play a lot in the preseason, but I think that they have long-term plans for Wieskamp. So again, I don't think that they would waive Wieskamp. So that player, then the next player who has a guaranteed contract, who, he has a lot of players in front of him in the rotation, is Romeo Langford, where he has Keldon Johnson, he has Devin Vassell at the 2 and the 3, he has Josh Primo, he's going to have Josh Richardson when he comes back and joins the team. So there's a lot of guards ahead of Romeo Langford. So yes, even though he's on a guaranteed deal, he is in the final year of that deal, and so we'll see if he ends up being the player that the Spurs have to waive. And again, it's just because they have to get their roster limit down to a certain number of players, and so that'll be the player to watch. And it feels like this is something Matthew Tynan tweeted, was that like it almost feels like the Spurs are still trout in this game because the fact that Romeo hadn't been coming in until either like late in the third quarter or most of the fourth quarters, but now tonight they put him in not real minutes, but in more competitive minutes in that first quarter. So again, Langford is the player to watch there, and that's what I wrote down, was that it was interesting that Langford played in the first quarter. In the second quarter, the Spurs, they mentioned this, it's preseason, they're learning how some of these players are getting enhanced roles. And so turnovers have continued to be an issue for this team that we've seen the preseason. But again, it's very considering that this team is young and they're learning. There's a lot of new players, a lot more responsibility for even some of the veterans. And so that's kind of where OKC got a good chunk of their points, 23 points off turnovers from the Spurs. The Spurs had a number of turnovers there. And then some other thoughts that I wrote from the second quarter, where Primo continues to attack. He's really taking advantage of Giddey's defense. Josh Giddey of OKC. Primo really saw that he can get by him. And then at halftime, we saw that projection that the Spurs were going to be in attack mode at the paint, because at halftime, 57% of their shots paint. In the third quarter, I noted how Vassell got really aggressive about driving in, using that little dribble backstop and being able to shoot that fadeaway against the Thunder defense. He was also creating for his teammates. Keldon Johnson, also in that third quarter, got very aggressive as well, trying to score and attack the basket. He went on a little run for himself, Keldon. And then in the fourth quarter, I did want to note that Coach Pop actually played the starters in the fourth. Normally, he had been resting the starters after the third quarter in this preseason, but now that the regular season's coming here next week, I think he wanted the players to get their that feel of what is it like to play 20 plus minutes a night, like they're going to be doing in the regular season. So Coach Pop actually played the starters for most of that fourth quarter. He pulled them about 5 to 3 minutes left in the game. And then I also noted that again, Primo continued to attack in the fourth quarter. He was very aggressive there. So again, those are just some takeaways of how the game went. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some interesting quotes I found from Pop and a few of the players after the game. Because I went through and listened to all of their interviews, and I took away some quotes here. First, let's begin with Pop. Some of the quotes that stuck out to me from Coach Pop here after this ball game. All right, so the first one was on Vassell's offense. This is actually pregame. This is actually before the game even started. Coach Pop says on Vassell, he's become very confident. He's become proficient at shooting the three. He's attacking the basket with aggressiveness, looking for opportunities. He knows we needed to score. Enjoys that. I don't know what player wouldn't. He's done a real good job of stepping up his game. So this is Pop being very complimentary of Vassell and the fact that he knows that Vassell knows that he has more responsibility in his hands now that he's one of the few players in this team who's going to have to create a lot for himself and others on the offense. And Pop says that he's seen that from him early on in this preseason. And then after the game, this is one of the quotes from Pop, because we do want to note that Josh Richardson was still out. He had got injured after that previous, not the Jazz game, but the game before that, the Pelicans game. There we go. And so Richardson didn't play tonight, and then also Zach Collins is in the concussion protocol, so he didn't play either of those two players who we assume are going to be part of the rotation when opening night comes. So Pop was asked, after the game, are Josh and Zach going to be available? Here was his response. He says, "J. Rich will be ready. Zach, it just depends on the protocol, but he's been doing the protocol. If I had to guess, I would guess he'd be ready to go unless there's some sort of a step backwards in his recovery." So again, we do think that Josh Richardson for sure is going to play, according to Pop. And then also if Zach plays, well, then that probably means that Gorgie Jang doesn't get those backup center minutes that we've been seeing him get because Zach Collins has been out. So again, that was Pop on Devin scoring, and also on pretty much on his offense, not just scoring, and then also on the injury status of Zach Collins and Josh Richardson. Now let's go to who's this? Devin Vassell. Okay, so these are some of the quotes that I took away from him after the game when he was talking about Primo. You know how Primo was very aggressive coming off the bench. He says, "I think he brings some." Especially coming off the bench, if he's coming to become the sixth man, if he's going to become the sixth man, a big guard, 6'6", could play at the point guard, good pace, everything. I think that's a good role for him, but who knows? I'm not the coach. I don't know what role he's going to play. So again, Devin thinks that if Josh is going to be like that six-man role, that initiator, that spark off the bench, he thinks that he can definitely do that. But again, he said, you know, he doesn't know if that's going to end up being Primo's role for the whole season because you know, it ends up being Coach Pop's at the end of the day. But again, there's that opportunity for Doug and Josh Primo because Lonnie Walker is now gone off the team. He's with the Lakers, and so there is that opportunity for someone to step up and be that sixth man. And we've seen that from both Primo and Doug. They're a good tandem who can come in quickly and give you a quick amount of points off the bench. And then as far as Devin, when he was asked about his expanded role on offense, here's what he said. He said, "That's why I put on some weight to be able to get to the basket. Hopefully I can get some more calls this year." So that was one thing that Devin mentioned, that he wanted to put on weight this past offseason to be able to absorb more contact and try to get to the free throw line because he knows he's going to have to continue to create for the Spurs there in the half court. And so now the last player that I want to show some quotes from is going to be Keldon Johnson. Let me go find his clip real quick. Okay, so actually I'm just going to read this one because I can't actually pull it up. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, Keldon says about Primo, pretty much a very similar comment to Devin's. He says, "He came in and gave us a spark tonight. I feel like that's the player he can be every night. I feel like Primo can get to the rim. He's 6'7", playing the point guard. He can get to the rim. He can score the ball. He can pass the ball. He can do it all. I feel having a unique player like Joshua who can really turn it on and get things going, it's big for us." So again, that was Keldon Johnson there after the game on Josh Primo. So you know, this is it. Now we just basically watch for who the Spurs have to waive. They're going to have to waive 2 players, like I mentioned, from now until the start of the regular season. We'll see who those 2 players end up being. And then that's it. Opening night is here for the regular season, starting on Wednesday against the Charlotte Hornets for the San Antonio Spurs. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.